Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at more things with P5 and JavaScript and look at loops. So you have this book that we've been looking at, and I'm sure when you look at the examples, there are a lot of things going on here that you don't understand yet. And that makes sense because we haven't yet covered all the things that you need to know to understand these examples fully. So let's look at a couple of things, and then hopefully at the end of that, you'll be able to go back and understand these examples better. Okay, so go to your Glitch account and open a new project. And I have one here started already, and I've added in my script tag inside of my header tag that links to the P5 library. And I have inside of my body tag here, I have a link to my P5 sketch, which is over here. So make sure you have something like this set up in your sketch, and let's go to our JavaScript file. So from last time, we know that we have two functions that are required for our sketches. So first, we have our setup function, which we have to put in every single time we start a P5 sketch. And this is where we create our canvas and then give it a size. So I'll give it a width and a height of 800, and I will do a background. I'll just give it a white background, even though that's default. So this setup function sets up the canvas once. Here, let me change this to black. Sets up the canvas once, and that's all that it does. It doesn't continue on to loop through. Why is, oh, I forgot my function. Parentheses. You need that to call the function. Okay, so it sets it up once, and then the second loop or second function is the draw function. And the draw function is where we create our sketch and populate all the things on the canvas that get updated continuously by calling in the canvas context. So we can start off by creating a fill for a color of something that we're going to put in here. I'm just going to use color words because it's easier, but I can, by default, I could use RGB, or I could change the color mode to HSB. For now, I'm just going to use these easy to remember color words. And here I can add in something like no stroke. And then add in an ellipse function. And we know that the ellipse function needs an x coordinate and a y coordinate for the position. So I'm going to do 10 and 10. So 10 over, 10 down, and then I'll just make it 10 wide and 10 tall. So there is our pink ellipse dot. And if I want to add in more, I can keep doing that. Let's say I want to add in a line of them across the top, then I would do 10. 30 is the X position, and 10 is the Y, and then it's 10, 10. So because it is 10 wide, I had it move over 30 to draw the ellipse, and then there's about 20 pixels in between. So now I can do ellipse again and move it over 20 more pixels. So I'll do 50 and then 10, 10, 10. And I could continue on like this over and over again and fill up the dots on the screen if that's what I wanted to do. But you can see this would take me a really long time, and I'm adding 20 each time here, which is an increment of 20. And there are easier ways to do that. So let's create an easier way to do that. So let's create a variable. So we can create our own variables and declare it. And I'm going to call it, I can call it whatever I want. I'm going to just call it position1 or POS1, position1. And I'll say that that equals 10. And now I can use this variable that I've created. So I am creating, I can write this out. Position1, which declares a variable, and then I can say position1 equals 10, or I can just do it all in one line. So it's declaring the variable position 10, and it's making it position1, and it's making it assigning the value of 10 to it. So now I can use that and create my ellipse using my variable that I created. And instead of writing the X number, I'll just write position1, and then I'll do 10, 10, 10, 10 again. Oops, that's too many 10s. Oh, well, I'll put it down further down so that you can see it. So let's do 40 from the other line. Okay, so I just did the same process as I did up here, but I replaced my X value with a variable. And now that I've done that, I can use an increment to continuously draw that across the screen. So I'm going to add in a new position and say that position1 now equals or will be assigned to be the last value of position1 plus a value of 20 pixels. So now it is going through this loop over and over again and updating this variable. So the function, the setup function occurs once. It creates the canvas, it draws the background, and it only happens one time. And the draw function, once we draw to the canvas, it keeps going through a loop. It's moving around in a loop continuously. So this is always going in a loop. And each time I go through the loop, I'm adding to it. It's kind of like if I was drawing a circle and then I just kept moving my pencil around and around. Every time I move that around, it's going to add to that drawing. And that's what's going on here. So what it's doing is saying, create ellipse at position1, which is currently in this program 10, because up here I set it to 10, and then 40, and then 10, 10. Oh, what's that? That's not right. There we go. So it's doing that. And then when it gets to here, it takes that variable position1 and it says, okay, now add 20 to position1. Now add 20 to position1 and store that in position1 now. So update it so that we are adding an increment of 20. So now it's going to go back through the loop, but position1, which was 10, now has 20 added to it. So now it's equal to 30. So now it's going to go through and do this loop again. And when it gets here to draw this ellipse at position1, it's going to be at 30. So that second circle gets drawn. And now it's at 30 and it adds 20. So this variable now has an increment. The 30, position 1, which is stored, 30 is stored in position 1. It's now going to get 20 added to it and be assigned to this variable again. So that equals 50. And now it's going to go through and loop through again and draw that at 50. And now it's going to add 20 and do it again, and add 20 and do it again, add 20 and do it. So that is a way to use the stored variable to repeat something, but add in an increment each time. And that's going to be really useful for us when we are drawing with our programs, because there's so many different things that we're going to want to add in multiple steps to at once. So it's always good to remember that this equal sign is not this is equal to this, but that we're assigning this value and then reassigning that value every time we loop through this. So I can do that with another variable and make position 2, let's say, and then we will make that also 10. And let's do something with another ellipse, and then do position 2 and 100 and 10 and 10, and then do position 2 equals position 2 plus 1. So now it is doing the same thing that this increment is doing above this one, but it is adding an increment of 1, which is really close together. And so it just looks like a line that's being drawn because they are so close together. If I add in the background to the loop down here instead of up there, it's going to update the background each time it goes through that loop. So then it just looks like a dot moving across the screen. But I'm going to keep that in the setup function. I just want it to draw it once. And let's go to turn it white. Okay, so I have this that's now drawing across the screen. If I wanted to have this be position 1 and position 1 and position 1 and update it to be plus 1, that won't work because my position 1 has already been, it's declared up here, and then this has already changed it to be incremented. So I can't use that same variable here. I need to make that a different variable when I'm going to give it a different increment. And now it should update. Oops, I have to put that there. It should update and draw that again. And this time I'm going to write it in the shorthand. So I can write it this way, or you can write, there's a shorthand that is, looks like this. So it's take the variable position 2 and increment it plus 1 each time it loops through. So that's why this is not the same thing as an equal sign. This is an assignment, and the shorthand way is, we don't have a symbol on our keyboard for increment. So we have to do these kind of annoying things, but this would be the shorthand for add plus 1 each time you loop through. Or I could add if I wanted to add something like, if this were plus 50, oh, and you need that. So now it will give me a lot bigger of a space. I can also write that in a shorthand by writing position 2 plus equals 50. And that is, this variable position 2 will increment by 50 each time it loops through. So the plus equals is a way to increment and then add in whatever number you want. And the plus plus is just adding 1 each time. Okay, so I am going to add a different color now so we can see the different sections. Let's make the next one blue. So I can do this over and over again, and I can do this, you know, change the variables for any of the variables. So I've just been using the X position. I can do the Y position. I can do the width and the height. Any of the variables, I can store them and increment. But I have to do this with my variable declared here, and then I'm changing it. And this is actually going on forever because I'm initiating this ellipse and then telling it to increment, and it's just, this loop keeps going, just keeps going and going and going. So even though you can't see it, it is, all right, my canvas is 800 wide. So it is going beyond that, even though this is only 800 wide. So I can do something with a loop and do it only for a certain amount of time. And we're going to talk about for loops and while loop. So the while loop is kind of a broken down loop, but I can declare a variable for it inside of my draw function. And I'm just going to call it position 3 and set it equal to 0. And then I write while position 3 is less than 800. So 800 is the width of my canvas, and my position is going to be my X position that I've been drawing across the screen. So while the position is less than 800, because I know that it's 800, is the only amount of times that I want the circle to draw. So I'm not going to have it go on forever while it loops. I'm going to make it stop within the confines of my canvas window. So while it's 800, under less than 800, now in my function, I'll do a rectangle and do position 3. Let's see, where were my other things? So 100, let's do 150 down, and we'll make it 20. Oh, it's doing that because I don't have this finished yet. 20 and 20. And then let's do an increment of let's do position 3 equals position 3 plus 30. Okay, so it's making us, setting the fill to blue and declaring a variable position 3. And while position 3 is under 800, it's going to draw rectangles over and over again that are 20 pixels wide and high. And then it's going to add 30 pixels to the last position and move over and then draw it again and draw it again. And I can do this again. So I could take this and I could do just var p and make this less than 400. And I'll call this p. And I don't know, increment it by 10. Oh, this has to go down. Let's go down to 200. Oh, no, I don't want to wait. Show next code. Okay, so it's I'm incrementing by 10, but my square is 20 wide. So let's make that 5 and 5. Is that going to work? I need a little bit more space. Yeah, okay, so that works. So now it is drawing the pixels starting at 0 on the X and 200 down, and it's making them 5 pixels wide and 5 pixels high. And then it's adding 10 pixels to the X position. So now this is 10 pixels over. And now this is 20, this is 30, this is 40, 50, 60, 70, and so on until it reaches 400, and then, or I guess 390. So as long as it's less than 400, it will draw another square. But as soon as we get to 400 or past 390, since I have increments of 10, it's not going to draw another square. So that is how the while loop works. But we don't really use that because there's a better way to do things. You might use it for some things, but the for loop is what really gets used the most. And the for loop does the same thing that the while loop does, but it does it in a way that lets us reuse the same variable over and over again. So the way that we do the for loop is we start off by writing, here I'm going to change the fill again. So my blue squares are my while loop, and my pink dots at the top are the increments, and now we're going to make some red dots. Okay. The for loop, add a little comment there, and I'll add a comment here. While loop. So the for loop is a really handy function, and we write for, and then within our parameters, we can declare a value, a variable here instead of in here. So this is the local variable. This is a global variable. And now what's handy about this is I can just use the same variable each time I use a different for loop. So I'm going to use the variable I, and I is a common variable that is used for the for loop, but this could be anything. This could be blah, but you'll see it written often with the I. So I'm going to use the I. So I'll say there's a variable I and it's equal to 0. And then I'll say while I is less than, don't need a space, but I'm writing a space. So while I is less than 800, and then a semicolon, increment I, we'll do increment I so that it adds 30. Now I do squiggly bracket, and inside my squiggly bracket, I can write my ellipse, and I will be my X value, and then I'll do 250 and 10 and 10. Okay, so I have my loops, my for loop, my while loop, my increments. And now that I have this ability with the for loop to declare, I can declare this variable. I can give it this condition of having to be less than 800, and I can add the increment there. So the for loop lets me do those 3 things, and then I can do it over and over again, which is helpful because now I want to, let's say I want to do another for loop, and I can now do var I again without worrying about it, because the for loop executes everything inside of this loop and is contained within that loop. So I don't have to worry about the way that the variable is declared elsewhere, because whatever's inside of here, it's only going to happen inside of there. So that's useful for me because I don't want it to change other things. So I can do the same thing that it, well, let's change it. So it equals 4. And then I can do I is less than 400. Let's change it, 600, and then I equals I plus 50. And I'll do an ellipse again and do I. $300, 10, and 20. Let's do that. Okay, so it's allowing me to use that I can do that again. It's starting at 4, where it's starting the drawing at 4. So that's the center of that ellipse. And making it 10 wide and 20 high. And then, oh, I didn't increment. Oh, yes, I did. It's in the loop. So then it's adding 50 pixels to the X value, which here is I, and adding 50 each time it goes through that loop. So that's really useful. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to show is that you don't, so I have 800 here as the width, which is the width of my canvas window. If you want it to be just the width of the canvas window, you can use width here, which is part of the P5 library. So you can use width and you can use height. So I could say, I could do all of this with the height instead of the width, which we'll look at in a second. But if we look at what I have been doing now with, so at first we were drawing these individual ones, and then we got increments and another increment. And then we got the while loop, And now we can do the for loops, which lets us reuse this variable. It's faster. The while loop, we have to keep redeclaring new variables. But I've been really only working horizontally. And what I want to be able to do is do something horizontally and vertically and apply it all at the same time. And that's how the for loops come in really handy, because we can put loops inside of loops. And already we're putting loops inside of loops because we're putting loops inside of the draw function, which is also a loop. So if I want to, if you notice, what I've been doing is changing what my variable is for x and incrementing that x value, which here is I, here it's p, here it's position. But here I have a y value of 250, a y value of 300, 200, 150, 50, 20. So it's going down as the numbers get higher. And what I want to do is draw my circles across and also then draw them down. And this is the grid that we see in the examples in the book, and also in the examples, the color examples. So what we're going to do is draw all of the vertical ones first, and then draw all of the horizontal. So let's see how to, well, I'll just do it and then we'll make sense of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is the same thing I've been doing. So it's for, then I add a variable. So I'm going to call this one, yeah, I'm going to put it at just 0. And then I'll do x is less than the width. And I will do x is incremented 10. And we need our curly brackets for our function. And now I have my conditions for my first increment. What I want to do inside of it, which is going to be my x. What I want to do inside of it is now do another one for my y. So I'm going to do my variable as y, and it's going to also start off at 0. And while the y is less than the height, I could also write 800 there. I'm going to equally increment y so that it is adding 10 pixels. So I'm doing incrementing the x 10, incrementing the y 10. Now I have to do curly brackets again. And now here's where I'm going to put my ellipse function. So I'll do ellipse I, y, 5 and 5. And let's curly bracket, curly bracket, curly bracket. Do I have all the right curly brackets? This is the problem with these red things showing up for our JavaScript library, is that then it's hard to tell which things you have wrong that are not these not defined messages. But okay, something's missing. What am I missing? I have this is x minus less than the width, increment 10. Oh, it had x. It should be I. We have I and y. Okay, so there's that. And then I have for the variable y, which will equal 0. I have y is less than the height. increment at 10. Whoops. 5 and 5. 1 second. Okay, so I have confused my I variables with x's because it's the x value. So this is good to see because these are the kinds of things that you have to look out for. You might have something and then it doesn't work and you really have to like go through like, okay, what am I missing? And make sure that all of your things line up correctly. So, okay. So now it is doing all of the changes to the y increment and then to the x and doing it simultaneously until it reaches the height and the width, and it's giving us an ellipse across all of those things. And so this is going to be really useful and helpful for understanding what's going on in these examples and also for using it in your projects. And the functions, the loop functions are really going to be essential to get a grasp on and understand for building out your projects. So now when we go back here, we can see, okay, they set up variables. They have a setup function, which we know how to do, created a canvas, no stroke, set the color mode, have their draw function. They created these two variables here, which are the mouse x plus 2. And now they have a for loop function, declaring this at 0, having it less than the height, the grid y variable, and then they are going to increment this other, to increment this variable, whatever the mouse is plus 2 according to this variable. And they're going to do that also in the other direction. So they're creating another loop that is in the x direction. So this is the y direction. It doesn't matter the order really. It's whatever you want to do. This is just how they have it. And so there's a loop going across the x direction, and then they are drawing a rectangle with a fill of their grid x. So, you know, they have these very these nested variables and nested loops, but it's really just referring back to things that they've declared. And so you can see how the rectangle grid now fills with wherever the mouse is moving. It's going to change the size of the squares as you move along with it. So hopefully that gives you some more guidance for looking at these examples and also working on your projects. This week, play around with loops, get really used to working on declaring variables, giving it a condition, adding an increment, and then drawing something. So you can do all kinds of things and then go on to the next tutorial. See you soon.